Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
It is indeed a pleasure to see you again and to interview you.
Anything for FVR.
Let me start out. Where did it all begin? How did you get to know each
Yeah,
other?
well, where it all began might be better than how did I first meet him. Because where it all began was with our parents.
Okay.
The ambassador and Secretary Narciso Ramos and my parents, President and Miss Macapagal, were very close to one another. Ambassador Ramos was my dad's ambassador to Taiwan. And then later, when he became Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and my father was already retired, my father would give diplomatic small dinners, and the older Ramos couple often attended. So they were really very, very good friends. Now, as for FBR and me, well, I grew up in academia. He was in the military. When we both served President Cory, I was undersecretary in the economic cluster, and he was full-fledged cabinet member in the security cluster. But when he was already very much, how shall I put it, primed to become already a very prominent figure with the making of a president, then I did get to meet him already in a more substantive way.
Okay.
So that was when he was aspiring to become president.
Okay. Initially, did you have any impressions that he was headed for there?
You know, my father always used to say, it's time Pangasinan gets a president.
Ooh.
Yeah, because the Tagalog region created presidents, the Ilocano region, the Visayan region, and he said there's no Pangasinan yet, and it's time, and it happened.
Prophetic.
Yes.
CongDado. I saw it that much. But you saw it as well? Did you see
Well,
it?
I always believe in my father's judgment. So when he was saying that, I was, we
Any
appreciated
indications you saw that he was heading towards that
Well,
move?
my father was saying those. It's when FVR was already becoming prominent. My father was saying it's really time for Pangasinan to produce a president.
Okay. Your observations of him, your impressions of him. You were working in the same cabinet. That's where your career paths initially crossed.
They didn't cross that much, as I said, because he was in the security cluster and I was in the economic cluster. But what impressed all of us, whether or not we were dealing with it every day, was how he saved President Cory from all those coups.
7 of them. There's you ran for the in the 92 election.
In the same year where he became president.
You both were initially in the same party.
No.
LDP.
No.
Hindi ka ba nag-LDP?
We weren't in the same party initially. He won as Lakas and I won as LDP.
Correct. He had to join the LDP but lost, di ba?
Yes.
And
He
then
he did not make it to the what they call the consensus.
The primaries.
But with the support of President Cory, he put up Lakas and he won.
You were a junior senator. I enjoyed covering you as
Thank you.
chair of the
Economic Affairs. Yes.
Committee. And it was actually very much in tune with what was the catchphrase? Economic liberalization.
Yes, which
and
was his
global-
philosophy.
Yeah, right.
Which was we shared. I shared much of his economic philosophy. So even though I belong to what they call Ed Angara's conscience block, which was independent, sometimes we supported and sometimes we did not as a block. In my economic legislation, I always supported because I shared his economic policy, and I believe that he could do something to help the Filipino people, and I was right.
Why not just fiscalize?
As I said, because we share the same philosophy, so it's hard to fiscalize when you share the same philosophy.
Okay. Philippines 2000.
Yes.
That was it. What particular facets of it were you attracted to?
Well, he wanted to modernize the economy. He wanted to bring it to the world. It was the heyday of liberalization and globalization, and that was the way to go. to be competitive. He wanted to be competitive, so that's why he wanted to liberalize and deregulate. So that's free enterprise, and that's how all the economic tigers left us in the 1970s, because we remained protectionist and import substituting in the 1970s, whereas what became the tigers were all opening up and modernizing and facing competition. So FVR brought us there.
The economist in you saw a commonality of interest
Yes,
as well?
yes,
And,
yes.
and shared with it there. Share with us some of your favorite bills that you helped.
Oh yeah, in
shepherd.
helping. Well, I would not necessarily say that they were my favorites. Some of them, they were difficult, controversial, but they were important.
Okay.
I would say, for instance, there was the ratification of General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which established the WTO. That was significant because that brought us into the world economy. Officially brought us into the world economy, and that truly reflected the philosophy of President Ramos of liberalization, globalization, competitiveness. And then another very important bill. Oh, this one is not so controversial. I liked it. Was the expansion of the Build, Operate, and Transfer law. So it defined many forms of public partnership that could be allowed, and that's important because even up to today, it guides the Build program.
He was an engineer by training, by profession. Did it take? Did you see that it needed an engineer's mind as well to to redo the Philippine economy?
Might be because an engineer is very logical and precise, and sticks to the basics. And FBR was like that.
Process.
Strategic direction. Strategic direction. That's what he had.
Another law, and I think you were author of it as well, or co-authored it. The LEDAC.
The author. Yes.
Legislative Economic Development Advisory Council. That in many of the interviews that we conducted, people who worked with FVR whose lives were traveled along the same path at one time, point to the LEDAC as a game changer, consensus builder, brought in everyone, all stakeholders, whether you be against the proposed legislation or whatever. Tell me, give us your take on the LEDAC.
Yes, actually, I wanted to have a law something like what my father had in the National Economic Council, where Congress was included. And I even wanted to call it National Economic Council. But during the bicameral conference committee, I was a senator then, the congressman said that they wanted to make sure that this is advisory, because you cannot have the Congress involved in decision-making authority of the executive. So therefore, it became called Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council. But even as an advisory body, as you say, everybody that you've interviewed says it was a useful mechanism. And it was even useful during my presidency.
Governance tool? Was an effective governance tool?
Yes, for building consensus, what you say.
Your own experiences when you joined the LEDAC meetings, your chairmanship of the Economic Affairs Committee.
That's why I was
crucial,
often there. Yes, and President Ramos presented his very important initiatives to us before they were really sponsored on the floor.
We used to ambush you guys.
Yes,
either
yes.
coming in or coming out of those meetings. But it did help fresh out the controversies, didn't they?
It helped explain it from the beginning, to explain the thing from the beginning. And then the president would listen to our observations and then act the best way he saw it after listening to our observations.
Brought everyone's
Well, he passed the
perspective.
legislation. Most of his legislation was passed.
What's your impression of that kind of a manager, that kind of a leader?
Oh, FBR. Oh, he was a. Oh, he was really a good leader. Maybe his engineering, maybe his military experience as a commander, but he was a good leader, and you're right, a consensus builder. He was not dictating.
Pretty strange for a military
For a
man.
military man, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Utos
yes,
na lang,
yes,
no?
yes, yes.
Let me get to foreign relations. 1993, let me take you back. Blake Island, FVR accepts the invitation. Bill Clinton trying to revive the APEC and turn it. At about the same time, we didn't know where our foreign relations was heading towards, and FBR takes the opportunity. Your own take on his use of foreign relations as a tool of
Oh,
bringing us back.
I think FDR knew his foreign relations. I think FDR knew what his end state would be, and he really was able to bring the Philippines onto the world stage. APEC, he was one of the founders, and the Philippines' moment of glory was when the Philippines hosted the APEC summit in 1996. The ceremonial portion was outstanding, and the substantive portion was equally important. The way that FBR described APEC's substantive achievement was like this, if I remember. He said, this is when APEC moved from talk to action. Because the Manila Action Plan outlined in detail the commitment of the 18 member countries to liberalization and globalization. I but add also another important contribution he made on the world stage was in the region in ASEAN. He's the father of Bimp Iyaga.
Oh yeah, okay. I remember how he would explain it. He wanted Mindanao, change Mindanao from southern backdoor to southern gateway. So just a change in the terminology, and it's also bringing in other parts of what would have been on the fringe economies of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. ASEAN. Okay, now that you mentioned ASEAN, generally the first foreign trip of a Philippine president before him was to the U.S. He didn't do that. He went around the ASEAN first. Your own take on him reconnecting first with his regional counterparts.
Oh, that was very good. That was very good because he helped to shape one of the realities in our foreign policy today, that more and more foreign policy decisions of the Philippines are made in the context of ASEAN. We moved together.
And he became a voice for it. And he became a recognized voice in the ASEAN. How your own observations on how he did that?
Oh, because his own gravitas, he always knew what he was talking about. He was never facetious. So he was very clear about foreign policy. He was very clear about competitiveness, liberalization, even with the globalization, even within ASEAN. And as I said, he was the father of Bimp Iyaga.
In the ASEAN forum, however, in the ASEAN network, however, they didn't want to discuss much topics that had friction, caused friction.
Yes,
among
because consensus is the mode in ASEAN, and not by vote.
consensus and dialogue. No?
It's the Asian way.
But he was able to, if you remember, he was able to bring in security discussions and
Through the ASEAN Regional Forum.
there we go.
Yes.
Your own, ano? That's statecraft. Your own, ano?
So, in other words, at that time, ASEAN moved from purely an economic grouping to a political and security grouping.
Sleight of hand. mahusay, nag-sleight of hand siya. He was able
Yes,
to...
yes,
he was,
yes, yes.
And yet, within the context of a regional...
Of consensus building.
Okay. But he also used ASEAN, if you remember, engaging China.
Yes, yes.
And that was the time when China was flexing its muscles.
Actually, if we're talking about China, I think FBR was really very forward-looking. Because at that time, China was just 10 years into its transformation. But he already saw what an important player China would be in the world. And in fact, he was one of the founding fathers of the Boao Forum. So truly, he was really very prophetic again, as far as engaging China is concerned.
Again, strategic thinking.
Yes, yes. That's why when you were talking about process, no, not process, strategic thinking.
Strategic thinking.
That is what FBR was really very good at.
At the same time, he started his administration. We lost the bases. We were at a flux with our relationship with the U.S. But by midstream, we were able to bring them back. Investments, even through APEC, he was able to convince American businesses to come back and do business in the Philippines in a more robust way.
FVR had the right formula for attracting investments. On the one hand, he believed in attracting investors by addressing their macroeconomic concerns, long-term structural issues through legislation. So and my role there is I helped shepherd most of them into law. For instance, the long-term lease for foreign investors, the horizontal application of the condominium law, the further liberalizing foreign investment, liberalizing banking. See, he addressed their macroeconomic concerns. And then on the other hand, also, he addressed their infrastructure needs, such as power and telecommunications. So that's, and I helped also shepherd them partially because for the power, I helped to, on the build, operate, and transfer law, which expanded his capability of having the BOT IPPs. But I must give him total credit for the deregulation of the telecommunications industry. That did not need legislation from us.
But that was a game changer, man.
Yes, yes.
Facilitated business,
Yeah, it's really modernized infrastructure. He modernized power and telecommunications.
Okay, okay. Let me go to peace. Three major threat groups during his period. He inherited the military adventurists, RAM. He inherited the Muslim insurgency in southern Philippines, even from former President Marcos. And then again also the CPP NPA. His catchphrase for this one was peace and development. Your take?
Well, I want to look at FPR's contribution to peace and development in a broad historical context.
Okay.
Together with President Cory, President Cory and FVR, what they did was a shared process that restored peace and democracy after a decade of turbulent authoritarian rule and restored it with stability.
Okay.
In the case of President Cory, she restored peace and democracy, but it was still a fragile restoration. When President Ramos came in, she passed the baton on to him, and he finished the job. He gave the restoration of democracy a stable character. And the thing that you were mentioning, for instance, he brought the MNLF into our political mainstream by concluding the final peace agreement with them.
Right.
And he also essentially broke the back of adventurism in our society, as symbolized by Greg Honasan running for and winning for senator after President Ramos gave him amnesty.
95, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you were together. You served in the same Congress, and he
Yes.
called himself a
Yes.
reformed rebel.
Yes, yes.
2 out of 3 successful with Normie Suwari, the MNLF, successful with military adventurism, RAM, SFP, YOU. Gave it a shot with the CPP, NPA, but maybe
It's still a continuing effort up to today anyway, the CPP NPA.
peace and development, he explained, could not happen.
Well, that was the way he achieved stability, yes. But the bottom line is, he achieved, he brought the MNLF into the mainstream, he broke the back of adventurism, and he made the restoration of peace and development and democracy stable.
Secured that. Let's talk about the latter part of his term. This was about the time when people were saying he might not have enough time. 6 years is too short for a good man, too long for a not so good fellow. If you remember, People's Initiative, Pirma, where were you on those two initiatives? Were you supportive, or were you?
Well, I had no problem with it. I had no problem.
That he would be allowed
Yeah,
to change the
if
constitution?
that happened, that would have been fine with me. I had no problem with that.
But you were having plans already.
Not serious plans when Pirma was there. It was only after the Pirma was shut down by the Supreme Court in March 1997 that people like Teddy Benigno approached me to consider running for president. Because I think before that, Benigno, I think they were for President Ramos also anyway.
Oh, so it's
See, weren't they friends of Joe Almonte? So their efforts to entice me to consider the presidency came, I think, after Pirma was defeated.
oh, oh, nga, no? Yeah, good. Thank you for But that was a toss-up, ma'am. Preparations for the 98 elections, FVR succession. Some say he may not have really planned well for it. As evidenced by, the many forces associated or aligned with him, yourself included, Joe De Ville, Rene De Villa, even Lito Osmeña, matching up against the popularity of Joseph Estrada at the time. Did he lack the savvy to prepare for that succession?
Well, from the start, I will say that I cannot make a judgment about how a president makes a decision about his succession. In my experience, every president makes his or his own decision, his or her own decision, based on factors unique to his or her time and his or her presidency. So I cannot make a judgment about that.
Okay. Eventually, he endorsed Joe De Ville. But you were still, at that point, you were still on presidency.
Like
mode, no?
many aspirants, I was one of those hoping for FBR's endorsement, but it went to JDV and I cannot question the President Ramos's judgment.
Tell us your take on your decision. Why you eventually slid down to join forces with the
Well,
House?
when JDV was selected as President Ramos's candidate, his supporters approached my supporters for us to combine. And then I saw JDV himself in a bill signing ceremony at the palace, and he conveyed the offer again in person. So I said, let me pray about it. So I went on a retreat with my classmates. And then after the retreat, Nona Rica Fort brought me to his house to say that I was accepting his offer. He was very happy. He said, "What are your conditions?" I said, "Well, I had no conditions other than trying to get Tito Soto into the senatorial lineup."
Oh yeah, Tito was your running mate. Yeah, and he did get into that.
No, no, he couldn't because
no, he went
because
to
one of
LDP.
the top leaders of Lakas was objecting.
Okay.
So Tito ended up running in the
LDP.
in the NPC lineup.
NPC. Okay. What was FBR's thoughts about the joining the union of forces, Lakas and your own campaign?
Well, after that, when I think it was the next day, JDV informed President Ramos about his choice for vice president. So of course, President Ramos accepted his choice.
Any discussions between you and FBR about that?
Well,
decision
not
of yours?
much. We just had to start getting into campaign mode.
Oh, ma. And you came out the victor. Jodevi unfortunately lost his bid, but you won the vice presidency, and being the highest elected official of Lakas, you eventually became chairman ba or president of the.
Oh, I don't really remember what my title in the party was, but I was the what you call the titular head. Highest ranking, protocolarly highest ranking member of the party.
But the next 3 years were going to be very difficult years.
2 years.
2 years. Some difficulty there.
2.5 actually, 2.5.
90. Tama. Some problems there because you were given the SWD portfolio. Pero medyo na-echapuera ka na because of the political affiliation. And then, Tito Ginggona stands up in the Senate and condemns Joseph Estrada. And the impeachment happens. Where was FDR in all of this? Where were you and FDR in all of this?
Well, as the constitutional successor, I had after FDR broke away and President Cory broke away and Cardinal Sin broke away from President Estrada, then of course I was constrained also to resign from his cabinet. And FDR consolidated Lakas behind the opposition to President Estrada, but not only that, he also brought me together with his military and his police network.
You?
Yes, because I was the constitutional successor. And then on the day that then AFP Chief of Staff Angie Reyes expressed support for me, FVR joined us, joined Angie and me, and we went to EDSA together.
EDSA II, very similar to EDSA I. I mean, pretty heady days. Did you expect, when you woke up that morning, if, the turn of events that would have...
Oh, the turn of events that was really very, very, the how shall I call it, the tipping point was Angie Reyes expressing his support for me. Before that, it was, it looked like it could have been a long drawn out struggle. But when Angie did that, then that was the tipping point.
Influential ba rin yung may impact yung input ni FBR?
As I said, not only did he consolidate Lakas behind me, he also brought me together with his military and police network, and that was very important.
That day ended with you being sworn in as president. Did he give you any advice? Or did you
No,
seek?
not at that time. But then during my presidency, he often sent me memorandum because this is what I can say about President Ramos. He doesn't give advice like a one-liner. He is very systematic. If he's going to give an advice, he does it in a memo with the arguments and with the premises.
Again, with putting his putting his thinking
Yes,
on document.
yes. So it was always that a framework. FVR always had a strategic framework in everything he did and in every advice he gave.
And this was all throughout your term,
Yes, yes.
Well, let me now get to people say there is some distinct similarities between how he does work and how you attack your work. You're both driven, you're very passionate. Tell me about
Well, we both work hard. We both work hard.
you start your day early, you end it late as well.
I don't know. I can't say that every day of my life is like that. As needed. As needed.
How does that feel? I mean, so is that supposed to be an ingredient for success? Being
Being
treated
hardworking is an ingredient for success, yes. Now, as to the specific number of hours in a day, I think that's not
Okay.
that's not part of an indispensable formula.
Okay. FBR in your presidency, he'd send you memos ever so often.
Yes.
So what, was he de facto senior advisor?
I would say yes. I would. He would send me these very well thought out and very well written memos. So, I read them and did what I could do to carry them out.
Okay. Were there any expectations for you to continue on with the kind of reform initiatives, agenda he pushed on?
Oh, most certainly, especially because I was known to share his economic philosophy, and because I had done most of his economic legislation when I was senator. So
Parang
certainly I was expected to carry those things out.
just a natural part of the process,
Yes.
which you did to a very to a very large extent, actually. Okay. I guess it's natural as well for presidents to weather political storms. There were quite a number of political storms that you passed through your term, 9 years. FVR was there all throughout. Tell me how important that his presence was as an ingredient in your, or the clout, I guess the influence of the.
Well, okay, just by way of illustration, I was just exchanging notes recently with a political analyst at Santos I consult, and we were talking about some of the threats during my time, and perhaps the most serious was the Hyatt 10, when a number of my key cabinet members were trying to trigger withdrawal of support from my presidency.
Yes.
Now, in the analyst's view, there were 3 events that turned the tide psychologically in my favor. First was President FVR and Speaker JDD immediately going to the palace in a show of support that demonstrated that I retained my political base. Second, Mayor of Manila then, Dito Atienza, organized a large rally for me in Luneta. And that demonstrated the grassroots support for me still existed. Third, I immediately appointed a new Secretary of Finance in the person of Land Bank President Gary Teves. So that served to demonstrate that there will be no economic repercussions on the Hyatt 10, but more importantly, it signaled that I still had the stature and credibility a leader needs to attract talent into his or her cabinet. Now, in these 3 things, the first one about FVR and JDB immediately coming to support, there was a visual image of that.
Right.
A smiling FVR, exuding confidence, dressed in casual clothes because his golf game had been interrupted, calmly walking the long hallways of Malacanang to meet me in a gesture of support. That's how crucial his support was.
He stood by his people. No?
Yes.
I guess that was also the soldier in him. walang iwanan or something. Towards the latter part, was there a parting of ways?
Oh yeah, he was. He expressed some displeasure about me. Um, Now, I hesitate to presume to speak for President FVR. But I think maybe for one thing, he was disappointed that I did not sacrifice enough to achieve charter change. And also, I think that he was very disappointed when Joe De Venecia was removed from the speakership. So I said I cannot speak for the president, but I'm just figuring out that those might have been very important factors that led to his being displeased with me.
Did the merger of Lakas and Campi also
That
come
might have been the third factor, although when it was still under Speaker Joe De Venecia, it seemed to be okay. But without Joe De Venecia in the picture anymore, then it didn't seem to be okay anymore.
medyo nag-falter. And yet, while he was on the sidelines, not very much in the picture anymore. He was still behind you.
Of course, because
All the way up.
President Ramos is an officer and a gentleman.
Diba? Can do nothing less. No? And you've kept connected over the years?
Yes, we've kept connected, yes.
What's it like when two presidents meet, ma'am?
Well, it gets more and more cordial each time, I venture to say, and I hope he feels the same way, because I've always had the greatest respect for him.
Is there... He's evolved into a senior statesman. The transition happening during your term. You mentioned Boao. He's a voice for not just ASEAN but for Asian growth, inclusiveness, and all that. 20 years later, does he remain a relevant political force,
Well, not political in the conventional sense, because he has no immediate family who is now active in politics, but his relevance is as a guide in governance for active politicians. He really has big shoes to fill.
if they want to follow his... Is there an FVR legacy to you?
Of course,
When you-
and it's quite a legacy
Okay, tell me
that
about
history will remember FVR for. Historians will write volumes about him, but I will distill my view on his legacy in three aspects, if I may glance at my notes,
Go
because
ahead.
I want to be as precise as possible.
Please.
First, FVR stood for the restoration of stable peace and democracy. I said it earlier. Together with President Cory, he shares the credit for making possible the peace and democracy that Filipinos enjoy today. But it is FVR who put the imprint of stability on it all. Second, FVR, and you talked about this too, was the first to make us aware of the vision of a proud, modern, globally competitive, and internationally relevant Philippines. Philippines 2000 was his battle cry. It was a call to arms for Filipinos to enter the third millennium with our head held up high. It's FVR who set the bar for what the future Philippines should be. He showed us the right path. But beyond just setting the high standard that we should strive for, he also defined the platform needed for us to reach the standard, a stable macroeconomy, I said it earlier, with its supporting infrastructure, I said it earlier too, and its functional linkages to the outside world, which talked about the APEC and all of that. Third, FVR is the father of what might prove to be the most ubiquitous and useful tool of the modern Filipino making his way into the modern world. And I refer to the smartphone that is now in the pocket or hands of the typical Filipino, whether they're poor or rich, young or old. Why do I say it's FVR? it all became possible because FVR opened up our telecommunications industry. So those are his three important contributions for his legacy that, for me, will make him forever be remembered by history.
I'd normally end there, but maybe off the cuff, is there an FBR moment with Gloria Macapagal Arroyo? Something that you will always remember him by, personal.
Well, his philosophy is a philosophy that I share, and I still, I've always tried to carry out the economic philosophy of FBR.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Okay,
time.
Toby. Thank
Oh
you.
my gosh.